A new survey reveals the ratings of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. are going up, but he is still behind Vice President Sara Duterte. Good morning, I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is At the Forefront. Pulse Asia's first quarter survey conducted from February 27 to March 2 shows an improvement in President Bongbong Marcos's approval rating. This despite criticisms on the way his administration is handling the flood control scandal. But even with these improved numbers, PBBM is still behind Vice President Sara Duterte's ratings, which remain unchanged despite impeachment complaints filed against her. What do these numbers mean? To help us understand this, we'll be speaking with Ana Tabunda. She's the Research Director of Pulse Asia. Good morning, Ma'am Ana.
Good morning, Karen.
So first, let's start with the main difference between approval and trust ratings. Ano po yung pinagkaiba nitong dalawa?
Well, the approval has to do with the performance of the person, whereas trust can be just anything. For example, you can trust a person who is not a government official, but you will not be approving of his or her performance because she is not a government official.
Okay, so that probably happens when you have siguro celebrities in the surveys where they have high trust ratings, but when it comes to approval,
we don't rate them for approval because they don't have any function.
So kailangan meron kang function as an incumbent to be rated for approval ratings. Okay, so let's start with the trust ratings then. The March 2026 trust ratings don't have a marked difference from the December 2025 ratings, which was just about roughly 3 months ago. So, napansin ko po dun sa Pulse Asia survey, meron kayong sinite na notable changes which occurred from last year's survey. So ano po yung main differences when it comes to the trust ratings from March 2025 to March 2026?
Well, let me get the data first. Well, there's an improvement in the trust ratings of President Marcos in NCR, Balance Luzon, in Class D. That's the main difference. Whereas for Vice President Sara Duterte, year on year, there has been a decline in her trust ratings in NCR, Balance Luzon, and Class ABC. So those are the differences.
So there was, for President Bongbong Marcos, for President Bongbong Marcos, there was an improvement in the trust ratings. But something I noticed, but there's a marked difference in the trust and approval ratings of the President and Vice President as to where they're coming from.
Yes.
For the President, his trust rating is 35. But if you look at the numbers, 54 is from Luzon, while Visayas and Mindanao are 17 and 10 respectively. Vice President Sara has a total trust rating of 54. Pero ang laki-laki po ng galing sa Visayas and Mindanao at 67 and for Mindanao it's 97.
Yes.
Do these numbers represent their bailiwicks?
Yes, it does, especially for Sara Duterte.
In your experience po, ito po bang mga numbers that represent bailiwicks? Do they remain unchanged in terms of when you conduct surveys over the years?
Well, in the case of President Sara Duterte, it has remained unchanged.
Even with the recent impeachment proceedings, meron po ba kayong nakita na difference? Like last year, at the height of the impeachment of the House of Representatives against Vice President Sara, nag-dip po ba yung trust or approval rating sa kanya?
It didn't change.
I didn't change. Okay. With President Bongbong Marcos, at what point po kayo nakakita ng dip when it came to the trust and approval rating of the President?
Well, early on in his administration, he already suffered a dip in his approval and trust. That's why they're below majority levels.
And early in his administration,
Yes.
did you
around
notice?
the first year.
First year po, was there any significant event, that you would remember?
I don't recall any particular issue.
What about the flood control controversy? When this started to blow up last year, did you notice a considerable change in the approval rating or trust rating of the president?
No. He is not affected by the flood control issue.
Hindi po.
Hindi.
Okay, kasi napansin nga namin that despite the fact that the Marcos administration has been criticized for failing to jail the big fish involved in the flood control scandal, parang nagkaroon po ng improvement pa rin sa trust rating niya. Despite the fact na nasa 34 lang ito right now, there was still an improvement year on year from March 2025. How much was that increase po?
It's a 10 percentage point increase.
10 percentage point increase. So, like you said, mukhang walang effect po yung flood control controversy. So, would you know what issues tend to affect the president?
I'm really not certain what the issues are.
It's hard to see it in the numbers.
Yes.
Okay, pero wala po kayong na-correlate na significant events like when you notice a dip?
No, I didn't notice any significant event.
Okay. Well, according to the survey as well of Pulse Asia, there seems to be no change in terms of the urgent national concern for Filipinos, and this is still inflation.
Yes.
Inflation remains to be the leading urgent national concern for Filipinos, rating it at, at least 59% of Filipinos say this is their biggest concern, yung pagtaas ng presyo ng mga bilihin. How will the Middle East crisis right now affect the approval rating of government officials, do you think?
I don't think it will affect their approval, but the concern could become more intense. The concern for high prices could be more intense.
So, ma'am, in terms of correlation, there can be concerns that are leading in the minds of Filipinos, but it doesn't necessarily approve or affect the approval ratings of government officials. So, itong pagtaas ng presyo that comes from the Middle East crisis, you don't see this as necessarily leading?
Yes, not necessarily.
Okay. What normally affects approval ratings po?
Well, if there are controversies, but as we saw, even if there was this flood control program controversy, it has not affected the president especially. His ratings rose year on year despite that issue.
Considering the numbers that we see, wherein the president suffers from low trust and approval ratings in Visayas and Mindanao, what do you think he should do to improve his numbers? But before I answer this question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. We continue our conversation with Ana Tabunda. She's the research director of Pulse Asia. Ma'am Ana, so what we see in the numbers is that when it comes to the trust and approval ratings of the president, yung pinakamalaki na is from Luzon, but he suffers when it comes to Visayas and Mindanao. So what should he do to improve his trust and approval ratings?
I don't think he can improve his trust and approval ratings in Mindanao, considering that there is this rift between the President and Vice President Sara Duterte. In the case of Visayas, he may have to be seen personally looking after the programs that benefit Visayans. That could possibly help.
But when you say that you don't think he can improve his numbers in Mindanao, considering there's a rift between him and the Vice President. Ganun po ba talaga ang behavior ng Filipinos that you see, that as reflected in surveys, that pagka yung loyalty nila is, for example, with Mindanao, there seems to be a loyalty to the Vice President. Hindi na nababago yun?
In this case, yes. Hindi nababago yung loyalty to the Dutertes. There's a very strong loyalty in Mindanao to the Dutertes.
To the Dutertes po. So, and you can say this based on your experience with Pulse Asia since before. I mean, in the past administrations po.
Yes.
Ganun na talaga.
Yes.
Okay, so how would you assess the approval ratings for the national government in general? Ano po yung findings ninyo?
Well, there's also an improvement year on year on the administration. Of course, they disapprove of the way the national administration has been handling the issue of inflation. But there are year-on-year improvements with regards to its performance in 8 issues. These are the rule of law, involuntary hunger. Well, there's an improvement, in inflation, agricultural assistance, peace, jobs, criminality, and workers' pay. So there are some improvements in the national administration's ratings. Now, it may be that the people are ascribing these improvements to the leadership of President Marcos, because the approval and trust ratings of President Marcos also increase year on year, just as the performance ratings of the national administration increases year on year.
But when you say increase, ano po yung naging increase? Like, what was the approval rating of the president last year and this year?
Oh, in the case of the president, his trust is 36 now.
36?
Yes, and it rose to 10 percentage points, so it was 26 last year.
So it was 26 last year?
Yes.
This is the trust rating.
This is the
What
trust.
about approval rating?
Let me get the data for that.
I think here, approval, 34. 34 last year. This year, the approval rating is 34.
Yes, this is 30.
So last
His
year...
approval this year is 36. And
I'm looking at the
his
the
approval
caption here. Is,
March 2025 was 25, so there was an increase in 11 percentage
okay,
points.
but if you look at this number, approval rating at 34,
36.
36, how does that fare in a scale of, I mean, would you categorize that as high, medium, or low?
No, it's low.
It's low.
It's low. In the case of President Duterte, he maintained his ratings in the high 70s and low 80s. In the case of President Aquino, the lowest he got was in the 40s.
Okay, so compared to the past administrations, the numbers of President Bongbong Marcos
Are not good.
are not good. Okay. Is there anything that you think stands out from what occurred in past administrations that would account for why you say the approval ratings of the president are not good?
In the case of President Duterte, he delivered on his promise regarding controlling the drug situation. That was a big factor in his high performance and trust ratings. In the case of President Marcos, there does not seem to be anything that he has been able to concretely deliver on. For example, lowering the price of rice, which was, of course, impossible to begin with. So that accounts for his low performance and approval ratings. He's not perceived as having achieved what he had promised.
Well, for the passage of the law that will prohibit or limit political dynasties in government, 64% of respondents say that they are in favor of having an anti-political dynasty law. if this law is passed, do you think this might help improve the approval ratings of the president?
I don't think it will have an effect on him.
Why is that?
It's because it's not the basis for assessing the performance of an incumbent, whether there is a political dynasty, whether it's manifest or not.
What normally affects the approval ratings of incumbent government officials?
The ability to deliver on the promises they made, that affects their performance and trust ratings.
Hindi po ba promise na nung sinertify ni Presidente as urgent itong anti-political dynasty bill, isn't that considered by Filipinos a promise that would be fulfilled kung naging batas?
No, it wasn't a promise that was made during the election, during the campaign period.
So you're telling me ang mga Pinoy, naaalala po nila ang mga promises made during
Especially
elections?
if you promise to bring down the price of rice. Yes, they will remember it.
Okay, interesting. When it comes to the impeachment proceedings against the Vice President, you said last year that it had no effect. Ngayon po, magkakaroon ng hearings sa House Committee on Justice on the impending impeachment complaints against Vice President Sara. You think pagka po nagkaroon ng full-blown hearing on the impeachment complaints, maaaring magka-affect yan sa either trust or approval ratings of the Vice President?
It might affect the trust and approval ratings in certain areas, but certainly not in Mindanao. I don't know if there will be a dip in the case of further dip in Balance Luzon, because Sara's ratings in Balance Luzon are comparatively lower than in the other areas.
You say that with a lot of certainty po. Why can you categorically say that it won't affect her trust and approval ratings, the Vice President's trust and approval ratings in Mindanao?
The loyalty is so strong that the Mindanaoans are willing to believe that these impeachment proceedings against her are not right, that she does not deserve those impeachment proceedings.
What about the time last year? It was just last year po na pinadala po si former President Rodrigo Duterte sa The Hague, sa ICC. Did you see any shift in the numbers back then, after that event?
No shift in the numbers of Vice President Duterte.
Hindi naman po nag-result in an increased approval or trust rating? No. Okay, what can we expect from the future Pulse Asia surveys? When will you conduct the next survey? Is this every quarter?
Yes, we're conducting one again in June, and I expect the ratings of the President and the Vice President will be essentially unchanged between March and June.
When you say essentially unchanged, when Vice President Sara Duterte announced that she will run for president in 2028, based on the experience of survey firms, Pulse Asia is one of the really established survey firms in the Philippines. Meron po usually bang ine-expect na change in numbers once you have a political figure announcing their candidacy?
I don't think it has an effect in her case.
But in the past, for others, nagkakaroon po ba ng either increase or is there unexpected
I cannot recall
change?
anyone announcing his candidacy or her candidacy that much in advance that we now have with Sara Duterte.
So parang in at least recent memory for you, ito yung pinakamaaga pong announcement.
Yes.
Do these numbers, the one we're seeing right now, mean that a presidential candidate endorsed by President Bongbong Marcos could not beat Vice President Sara in 2028 when it comes to Visayas, Mindanao?
Oh, yes. Yes. When it comes to Visayas and Mindanao, the effect of the endorsement of President Marcos will be nil.
Will be nil. I love how you say things with a lot of certainty, like wala po kayong hesitation. Pero kung ganun po ang sitwasyon na hinaharap ng administration, then in terms of just like someone like you as a research director, ano yung magiging advice nyo? Should they look for a candidate that also has a base from Visayas and Mindanao, or should they just keep playing on the strength they have in Luzon?
They can't just rely on Balance Luzon. Although Balance Luzon is much larger, Luzon is like Visayas and Mindanao combined. They will have to get support from Visayas and Mindanao. In the case of the presidency in 2028, it's going to be hard to find someone who can draw away support from Sara in Mindanao. So they may have to look at a candidate who can draw support, not necessarily be from Visayas, but can draw support from Visayas, as well as Balance Luzon and NCR.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Ana Tabunda. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
As the latest Pulse Asia survey lays out, public trust and approval are not static. They shift with performance, perception, and the pulse of the times. For President Bongbong Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte, the numbers tell a story that goes beyond popularity. They reflect expectations, accountability, loyalty, and the public's evolving judgment. The question now is not just where the ratings stand, but where they go from here. Be informed, be insightful of the news. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Always stay at the forefront.